I have always believed that there is an unbreakable bond between mother and child. Something special, something that could not be broken even by years of separation or the hardships of life. Now, sitting at the window in my son Garrett's house, I'm not so sure of that anymore. But let me start at the beginning. My name is Marion Thorpe. I'm 77 years old and I've worked nearly 30 of those years as a cashier at the Fresh Mart supermarket on the main street of Lunenburg. It's a small town where everyone knows each other, at least by sight. I wasn't born here. I moved with my husband Walter when Garrett was only 3 years old. We were hoping for a quiet life away from the bustling metropolis, planning to have more children. That's not what fate had in store. Walter died in a car accident when Garrett was 7. I remember that phone call in the middle of the night like it was yesterday, the moment that divided my life into before and after. Overnight, I was left alone with a young son, unsupported by family, in a town where we had almost no close friends. We had to move from the small but cozy house we were renting to a tiny apartment on the outskirts of Lanenberg. One bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a living room that served as my bedroom at the same time. I remember Garrett crying at first, asking why we couldn't live in a beautiful house with a garden anymore. I explained as best I could that Dad had gone to heaven and we needed to be strong and manage on our own. Working as a cashier in a supermarket was not what I dreamed of when I was young. I had an unfinished pedagogical education, but it was impossible to finish it with a small child in my arms. The pay at Fresh Mart was low but steady, and most importantly, the manager, Cliff Randall, let me work shifts when Garrett was in school. I often picked up extra hours when my son stayed with my neighbor, Mrs. Finch, a kind old lady who treated him almost like her own grandson. Every penny of my paycheck counted. We lived very modestly, but I made sure Garrett never felt deprived. I repaired his clothes instead of buying new ones. I learned how to cook with the cheapest food so that it was always delicious and nutritious. I saved on everything, even electricity. I remember reading books by the light of a small lamp while Garrett slept, so as not to burn extra electricity. I also saved. Every month, even if it was just $1, I put it in a special account. Garrett's education, I called it. It was my main goal, my way of showing my son that he could expect a better future despite our modest circumstances. Garrett was a smart boy. Maybe not the most diligent. There were frequent notes from teachers about his mischief. But he was smart and quick to pick up new things. In high school, he had taken a serious interest in math, and his teacher, Mr. Jenkins, had even talked about the possibility of getting into a decent college. I was over the moon, even though I knew that the money I'd saved wouldn't be enough for a full-fledged college education. But Garrett surprised us both by saying that after high school he wanted to take a truck driver's course. "Mom, it's practical," he explained. "Good money and freedom, no office cage." What could I say? It was his life, his choice. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew he was probably right. University would have cost us tens of thousands we didn't have. And with a driving career, he could really start earning almost immediately. So Garrett became a trucker. At first, he worked for local companies. Then he got a job with a big transportation company called Blue Horizon. The pay was good, especially by Lanenberg standards. Soon he could afford to rent a separate apartment, then even bought a used pickup truck for personal use. I was proud of him, although I admit it got lonely in our cramped apartment without his loud voice and constant presence. We still met every Sunday. He would come over for lunch and tell me about his travels, funny incidents on the road. Sometimes he brought little souvenirs from different states, refrigerator magnets, funny mugs, quirky figurines. I kept every little thing, arranged them on my shelves like precious trophies. That all changed when Garrett met Vanessa. He'd met her at some roadside cafe in Ohio where she worked as a waitress. Beautiful, energetic, 10 years younger than him. 3 months after he met her, he brought her to Lanenberg, and 2 months later they were married. It was a modest wedding in the town hall, with a couple of Garrett's friends as witnesses. I wore my best dress, the one I'd been saving for special occasions, and smiled so big that my cheeks ached by evening. Vanessa was nice to me at first. She called me Mom, took an interest in my work, even offered to help clean my small apartment. Garrett and I still met on Sundays, only now she cooked dinner. And I had to admit, She was a great cook, especially her signature apple cinnamon pie. The newlyweds quickly saved up for a down payment on a house. A small but nice one-story house on a quiet street on Maple Avenue, with a porch and a small garden, almost like the one we'd once rented with Walter. Garrett glowed with pride as he showed me every corner of their new home. "See, Mom, I made it. It's all because of you, your sacrifices." And then I began to notice a change. Sunday dinners became less and less frequent. First once every 2 weeks, then once a month. Garrett would call, apologizing, a long flight, urgent home repairs. Vanessa's friends came to visit. I knew they had their own lives, but a worm of worry was starting to gnaw at my heart. When they did invite me over, Vanessa found more and more excuses to get away, whether it was to a friend's house for coffee or to go shopping. And her sweet mom was gradually being replaced by a dry Marion. Garrett didn't seem to notice the change, or chose not to. A typical man, I didn't blame him. He worked hard, was home in between long trips. Retirement was a real challenge for me. After so many years at Fresh Mart, I received a modest send-off, a $100 gift card, and a cake that said, "Happy Retirement, Marion." Manager Cliff, who replaced the good Mr. Randall years ago, made a formal speech about my valuable contribution to the team. Colleagues clapped, I smiled, but panic was building inside. My pension was paltry, barely enough to pay for my apartment and the most basic necessities. Prices in Lauenburg, like everywhere else, were rising faster than the indexed payments. After 3 months, I realized that I could no longer afford to live alone. I had little choice, either to look for a neighbor, a similarly lonely pensioner, or to move in with my son. The second option seemed natural. After all, isn't that why we raise children? So that they could support us in our old age as we had supported them in childhood. The conversation with Garrett was surprisingly easy. He listened to me on the phone, then said, "Sure, Mom, we'll work something out." A week later, he came over, helped me pack the essentials. Most of the furniture had to be sold for next to nothing, and I was on my way in his pickup truck to their house on Maple Avenue. Vanessa greeted the news of my move with feigned enthusiasm. "That's so great, Marion. We're so excited," she said, but her eyes remained cold. I moved into the small room they planned to make into a nursery if they ever decided to have a baby. Garrett helped me move my boxes, set up the bed and a small dresser for my clothes. "Make yourself comfortable, Mom. This is your home now." The first few weeks passed in awkward adjustment to each other. I tried not to get in the way, to be helpful. I cooked lunches when Vanessa was at work. She got a job as an administrator at a local beauty salon, kept the house clean. But gradually it became clear that my help wasn't really appreciated. "Don't touch my stuff. I know how to fold my own laundry. That's not how it's cooked," were phrases I heard more and more often. Garrett was rarely home. His flights were getting longer, and sometimes he was gone for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. And when he came back, all his attention was focused on Vanessa. I understood, of course. A young wife, a bored husband, they need time together. But sometimes I caught myself thinking that my son barely found a moment to talk to me, to ask me how I was feeling, what I'd been doing in his absence. And then the money talk started. Vanessa started talking at dinner one night about rising costs, about how expensive it was to keep the house. "Marion," she said with a smile that didn't touch her eyes, "we're one family, aren't we? I think it's only fair that you contribute to the family budget. There are 3 of us now, after all." I looked at Garrett, confused. He shrugged awkwardly. "Mom, Vanessa's right. Your pension is your money, but we could use the help." What could I say? They sheltered me when I could no longer live on my own. It would be wrong not to contribute to the expenses. We agreed that I would transfer a third of my pension into their account every month. Vanessa suggested a simple system. I'd just withdraw the money and give it to her in cash, and she distributes it to the household. Only now, looking back, do I realize that was the first alarm bell. But at the time, I drowned out the inner voice, whispering that something was wrong. After all, Garrett was my son, my flesh and blood. Could he not love his mother? Could he allow me to be treated unfairly? No, of course not. I was just becoming an imaginative old woman, that's all. Or maybe it was because I was too afraid to be alone, too afraid to admit that what I'd always believed to be an immutable truth, unconditional love between mother and child, might be just a beautiful fairy tale we tell ourselves to keep from seeing reality for what it is. Mornings at the house on Maple Avenue always started the same way. I woke up at 6 o'clock, a habit developed over decades of early shifts at the supermarket. I went quietly, trying not to creak the floorboards, into the kitchen. I made myself a cup of tea, sat by the window, and watched the street wake up. Mrs. Peterson across the street taking her pug for a morning walk. Mr. Jenkins picking up the morning paper from the porch. In those early hours, the house belonged to me alone. Vanessa never got up before 9, especially when Garrett was away and he was only home 1 week a month. At times like this, I could pretend that everything was okay, that I was a welcome guest, a member of the family, not an annoying old woman who made everyone cringe every time her slippers squeaked. When I moved in 6 months ago, I tried to make myself useful. Cooked lunches, dusted, watered the flowers. I wanted to compensate for my presence, not be a burden. But I soon realized that my help was not only unappreciated, it was irritating. "Marian," Vanessa said one day when she caught me ironing her blouses, "I prefer to have my clothes ironed at the dry cleaners. They know the right temperature." Another time, she defiantly oversalted the soup I'd made and then ordered a pizza. "It's impossible to eat," she said to Garrett, loud enough for me to hear from my room. "Your mother has no taste at all." Eventually, I stopped trying, cooked only for myself when Vanessa wasn't home, washed only my own dishes, did only my own laundry. My life narrowed down to a small room at the end of the hallway, 12 square meters that became my refuge and my prison. Money was what became the real problem. At the beginning of every month, Vanessa reminded me of my contribution to the family budget. At first, it was a third of my pension, but gradually the amount grew. Utility bills went up. I had to change something in the plumbing. Grocery prices are going up. The explanations always sounded plausible. When I dared to ask if I could pay a little less, at least this month, Vanessa looked at me like I was a cranky child. "Marian," she said in her peculiar tone, slow and distinct as if I were dull of ear or feeble-minded, "we took you in when you couldn't afford your own place. Isn't that worth half your pension?" So I gave up. I'd withdraw money from the ATM and give her cash. Vanessa never offered a receipt, never showed me exactly where the money was going. Family budget was all the explanation I got. Luckily, I still had a small savings account that I didn't tell her about. The very money I'd once saved for Garrett's education but never needed. Plus, what little I'd managed to put away over the years. Not too much, but enough to feel some security. Garrett didn't seem to notice anything. When he came home after 2 or 3 weeks on the road, he was completely absorbed in Vanessa. They'd lock themselves in the bedroom for hours at a time or go off somewhere together, leaving me alone. I didn't take offense after all. They were a young couple, they needed their own time. But sometimes I realized that my son wasn't even interested in how I was living without him, didn't ask me if I was okay. And if I tried to tell him about my difficulties, he always took my wife's side. "Mom," he said once, when I dared to complain that Vanessa had thrown away my favorite mug, "you know how neat she is. That mug was cracked, could have cut your lip. She was worried about your health." The only comfort in my new life was the old laptop I'd bought before I moved in. It was nothing special, a simple used model, but sufficient for my modest needs. I read ebooks on it, which could be downloaded for free from the city library, watched movies, and sometimes wrote letters to old colleagues. It was my little portal to the world outside the house on Maple Avenue. It was a rainy spring that year. Drops drummed on the roof all day long, and the gray sky seemed to sink to the treetops. On days like that, my room felt especially cramped and my loneliness especially acute. I spent more and more time on my laptop until one evening it just wouldn't turn on. I pressed the power button over and over, checked to make sure the cord was plugged in, but the screen remained dark. The next morning, I worked up the courage to knock on Vanessa's bedroom door. It was almost noon, but she hadn't come out yet, usual when Garrett was away. "What is it?" she asked, opening the door just enough for me to see her disgruntled face. "I'm sorry to bother you," I began, trying to speak calmly and confidently, "but I think my laptop is broken. It's pretty old, so it's not surprising. I was thinking maybe I could use some of the money I give to general expenses to buy a new one? Nothing fancy, the most basic one, just to read books and watch movies sometimes." Vanessa opened the door wider and leaned against the jamb. She was wearing a silk robe I'd never seen before, obviously expensive, with an intricate oriental pattern. Marion, she said in the same tone of voice, slowly and distinctly, this is not a good time for extra expenses. We just had a big mortgage payment, plus Garrett needs to renew his insurance, maybe in a couple months. But I'm not asking for extra expenses, I objected, feeling my voice shake. I'm asking to use my own money, at least some of it. We've already discussed this, Vanessa cut me off. Your money goes to general expenses, the food you eat, the electricity you use, the water you use for showers. If it weren't for these expenses, perhaps we would have more free money. With those words, she closed the door, leaving me standing in the hallway feeling like I'd been kicked in the butt. I went back to my room, sat on my bed and stared out the window at the rain for a long time, wondering how my life had come to this. A few days later, while sorting through the mail, I noticed a brightly colored envelope from Midas Jewelry. It wasn't that I intentionally kept track of Vanessa's correspondence. It was just that the mail was usually on the hallway table, and I had to go through it to find my letters. Inside the envelope was a check for an amount that took my breath away, a new headset, earrings, and diamond pendant. The purchase had been made just 3 days ago, the day after our conversation about the laptop. In that moment, something broke inside me. Not anger, no, more like deep, pervasive disappointment. All this time, I'd convinced myself that Vanessa was just a frugal hostess, prudent with the family finances, that maybe she and Garrett were really struggling because they were so insistent on my financial help. But now the truth was clear. My money was going to Vanessa's personal whims, not to general expenses. I put the check back in the envelope and returned it to its original place. What could I do? Complain to Garrett? He wouldn't believe me. And even if he did, what difference would it make? He was rarely home, trusting his wife to run the household. Besides, a confrontation with Vanessa could only end in me being kicked out the door. Where would I go? What would I live on? I spent the next few days thinking about my situation. Without my laptop, my room became even more cramped and isolated. The only entertainment was the old paper books I'd brought with me, and the small TV in the living room, which I could only watch when Vanessa wasn't home. On one of those days, it was Tuesday. Vanessa usually got her nails done on Tuesdays. I was sitting on the porch, trying to enjoy a rare sunny day after a long rainstorm. Our neighbor, Mrs. Bishop, was watering the flowers in her front garden. "It's a beautiful day, isn't it?" she called out to me. I nodded, a little surprised. In the 6 months we'd lived here, we'd barely spoken to our neighbors. Vanessa didn't encourage such contact, believing it only breeds gossip. "I'm Edith," the woman introduced herself, coming closer. "And you're Garrett's mother, right? Marion?" "Yes," I confirmed. "It's nice to meet you." "Nice to meet you. I've been meaning to say hello for a while, but you don't get out much." There was something about her direct, open gaze that made her feel open. Edith was about my age, maybe a couple of years younger, with close-cropped gray hair and a tanned, wrinkled face, clearly spent a lot of time outdoors. "Yes, I prefer to stay inside," I answered awkwardly. "I see," Edith nodded, though I could see in her eyes that she understood much more than I had said. "By the way, I noticed your computer was broken. I saw you taking it out to the trash yesterday." I blinked in surprise. Indeed, yesterday I finally decided to throw away the now useless laptop, but I didn't think anyone would notice. "My son Rory has a small electronics repair shop," Edith continued. "Maybe he could fix it, or if not, he always has used models for sale inexpensively." "That would be wonderful," I was genuinely excited, "but I'm afraid I don't have a right now." I hesitated, not wanting to admit my financial dependence. "I understand," Edith said again, and again I could see in her eyes that she really understood. "You know what? Why don't you come over for a cup of tea? I've got a lemon tart baking and I can't do it alone." And so our friendship with Edith Bishop began. First tea once a week, then twice, then almost daily when Vanessa was away on business. Edith was a widow like me, only her husband had died only 3 years before of lung cancer. She had 2 grown children, a son, Rory, who actually kept a small electronics repair shop in a neighboring town, and a daughter, Lynn, who lives somewhere on the West Coast with her husband and 3 children. Rory comes to see me once a week, and Lynn calls every Sunday, Edith said. They invite me to live with them, but I like my independence. My own house, my own rules. You know how it is. I nodded, though I'd almost forgotten what it was like to live by my own rules. Unlike me, Edith was aware of all the local news. Who got married, who got divorced, who bought a new car or went on vacation. And of course, she knew about Vanessa. I don't want to be a gossip, she said one day, pouring tea. But your sister-in-law, does she go away a lot when Garrett's out of town? I shrugged uncertainly. She has her own things to do. I don't keep track. It's just that I often see her driving away in her red Mustang, Edith continued. Sometimes quite late at night, and she's back in the morning. Maybe she's out with her friends, I suggested, though I had a chill in my gut. Maybe, Edith agreed, but her tone made it clear that she didn't believe it. And that new set of hers. Garrett must be very generous. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to discuss family matters with a stranger, even if that stranger was the only person who'd taken a genuine interest in me in recent months. But Edith persisted. You know, Marian, she said, leaning across the table toward me, at our age we've learned to understand things about people. And what I see, it bothers me. It's not just Vanessa's late nights out. It's the way she treats you, the way she keeps you practically locked up in your son's own house. It's not like that, I tried to defend myself. I can come out whenever I want. But you don't, Edith said softly. And I can guess why. She made you feel unwanted, superfluous, a burden. I lowered my gaze, unable to meet the eyes of this shrewd woman. Tears stung my eyes, but I held them back. Years of practice. Look, Edith put her hand over mine. I'm minding my own business. I just want you to know that if you ever need help, any help, I'm here for you. Literally across the fence. I came home that night with a heavy heart, but strangely and somehow relieved. It was as if the dark secret I'd been keeping inside, my growing resentment toward my sister-in-law, my feelings of being unwanted, had been seen and recognized as real by someone. I was no longer alone with my fears and suspicions, and the next day Garrett returned, tanned, tired, but happy. The flight was a success. The pay was good. Vanessa greeted him as enthusiastically as if he'd come back from a war, not a regular trip through the Midwest. And I just stood in the doorway of my room, waiting for my son to notice me to come over and give me a hug. He did, of course, but he did it in passing, hurriedly, as if he were doing an annoying chore. At dinner, Vanessa was radiant. She'd prepared Garrett's favorite dish, steak and mashed potatoes, opened a bottle of wine, even lit candles. I sat at the table with them, but I felt like a ghost unseen, unheard, unwanted. By the way, honey, Vanessa said when the main course was done, remember when you said you wanted to get me an anniversary present? You don't need to look for anything. I've already found something special on my own. She reached around my neck and showed me the diamond pendant I'd seen in the mail. Do you like it? She asked, tilting her head coquettishly. It's beautiful, Garrett approved. But darling, isn't it too expensive for us right now? You know we're saving for a new car. Oh, don't worry, Vanessa said. I found it at such a discount. It was practically free. Plus, she lowered her voice as if sharing a secret, we have a little financial cushion thanks to your mom's contributions. Garrett nodded, clearly relieved, and went back to his dessert. I sat there, fork in hand, unable to swallow a bite. So that's where my money was going, into the financial cushion that Vanessa was spending on her jewelry. And this despite the fact that I'd been denied a new laptop that would have cost 10 times less than that pendant. I couldn't sleep for a long time that night, thinking about Edith's words, Vanessa's behavior, Garrett's indifference. Something had to be done. But what? I had neither the strength nor the means to confront them openly. I was too dependent on them, too vulnerable. After the dinner where Vanessa had shown off her new diamond pendant, something in me had shifted. For years I'd been quiet, compliant, forever worried about not burdening anyone. Perhaps that was why I was in this position, an inconspicuous old woman to do anything with. The next morning, when Garrett went to meet with his dispatcher and Vanessa went to the beauty parlor, I did something I would have thought unthinkable. I started looking for evidence. I didn't know what I hoped to find. Maybe confirmation of my suspicions that my money was being misspent, or maybe something that would convince Garrett to listen to me. I started in the living room, methodically going through the drawers of the desk where I usually kept bills and documents. Nothing remarkable: utility bills, insurance policies, warranty cards for appliances, the usual papers of an ordinary family. But in the very bottom drawer, under a stack of old magazines, I found a small box. Inside were several bank cards and a stack of bank statements. I'd never been particularly versed in finances, but even I could tell I was looking at something odd. Several accounts in Vanessa Thorpe's name that I'm sure Garrett didn't know existed. Monthly receipts, amounts almost exactly equal to the portion of my pension I was giving away. And some other regular transfers, the source of which I couldn't identify. But most shocking of all were the statements from Garrett's main account, the one where his paycheck came in. The balances were much lower than one would expect with his earnings. Large sums were regularly withdrawn and transferred to where? I flipped through the pages, trying to trace the path of the money, but the bank statements were too confusing for me. I took pictures of a few pages on my old button phone, the only tech I had left after my laptop broke. The quality of the pictures was terrible, but the important thing was that the information was preserved. Then I carefully put everything back in its place, trying to leave the papers in the same order as before. I spent the next few days in a strange state of anxious anticipation. Vanessa behaved as usual cold politeness in Garrett's presence, poorly concealed irritation when we were alone. Garrett had been home longer than usual. His next flight had been delayed because of some cargo problem. He spent most of his time in the garage, tinkering with his pickup truck, or sitting in front of the TV, watching sports channels. He barely spoke to me, other than the usual good morning and good night. I didn't know what to do with the information I'd discovered. Show the pictures to Garrett? But would he believe me? Wouldn't he think they were just senile fantasies or, worse, a deliberate attempt to smear his wife? Should I go to the police? But what exactly should I accuse Vanessa of? Spending my freely given money on jewelry instead of paying bills? That's hardly a crime. In the end, I decided to consult Edith. We met at her house, as usual, over a cup of tea. I showed her the photographs, explained my suspicions. "Oh, Marion," Edith sighed, scrutinizing the pictures. "I'm afraid it doesn't look very good. These transfers, they're regular and the amounts are quite large. If it's happening without Garrett's knowledge..." "You think she's stealing from him?" I asked bluntly. Edith shrugged. "It's hard to say for sure. Maybe they have some kind of arrangement. But from what you tell me about your life and the way she treats you, I have a bad feeling about this." "What should I do?" I asked, feeling the tears coming. "I don't want to cause trouble. Garrett, he's my only son. If I'm wrong, if I ruin his marriage, what if you're right?" Edith objected softly. "What if Vanessa really is cheating on him? You don't want him to lose everything he's earned, do you?" I shook my head. Of course I don't. But the thought of a direct confrontation filled me with dread. "Maybe you should talk to Garrett alone first," Edith suggested. "Calmly, without accusations. Just ask him about some of the strange things you've noticed. See how he reacts. It seemed reasonable. After all, he is my son. No matter how distant he's become, surely deep down he still cares for me. Trust me." I decided to wait for the right moment. It came 2 days later. Vanessa was gone for the day, something to do with her work at the salon, though I suspected it was just another shopping trip. Garrett was out in the yard trimming the hedges. I brought him a cold lemonade because it had been a hot day. "Thanks, Mom," he said, taking the glass. For a moment, he seemed like the Garrett of old, my boy, grateful for the small acts of caring. "Can I talk to you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. He frowned but nodded. "Sure. Is something wrong?" We sat down on the garden chairs under the old oak tree. I pulled myself together. "Garrett, I'm worried about your finances," I began gently. His face closed immediately, as if an invisible curtain had fallen. "What do you mean?" "Yeah, Accidentally saw some bank statements, I continued, deciding not to confess my purposeful search. And I noticed that large amounts of money were being withdrawn from your account on a regular basis. I just wanted to make sure you knew about it, that everything was okay. Garrett set the glass of lemonade on the ground and straightened up. His eyes darkened. Were you going through our papers? No, I hastened to assure him. They were on the table and I accidentally. Don't lie to me, Mom, he interrupted. Vanessa never leaves papers out in the open. She's very careful with these things. I felt myself blush. I'd never been good at lying, especially to my son. Okay, I admitted. I was really looking. But only because I'm worried about you, these translations. It's none of your business, Garrett said. Our finances are our own business, me and Vanessa. But do you even know about them? I insisted. About all those accounts in her name? About where the money goes? Garrett stood up, towering over me, his face contorted with anger. What are you trying to say, Mom? That my wife is stealing from me? Is this some kind of jealousy on your part? Can't handle the fact that there's another woman in my life more important than you? No, Garrett, you don't understand, I tried to explain, rising as well. It's not about jealousy. I just want to make sure that you don't. Enough, he shouted. Ever since you moved in, you've done nothing but cause trouble. Vanessa was right. You can't accept that you're not the center of my universe anymore. Garrett, please. I reached out, trying to touch his shoulder to comfort him. I just want to. I said stop. He pushed my hand away sharply. You're just an old, jealous woman who can't enjoy my happiness. His words hit harder than any slap. I backed away, feeling tears welling up in my eyes. Yeah, I'm sorry, I mumbled. I didn't mean to upset you. I turned and walked quickly toward the house, wanting only one thing, to hide in my room, to lick my wounds alone. Garrett followed me, still seething with anger. No, we're not done, he insisted, following me at my heels. I want to know exactly what you were looking for. What did you want to find by going through our files? We entered the house. I headed for the stairs leading up to the second floor where my room was. Garrett grabbed my arm, turning me around. Answer me, he demanded. What are you up to? I wasn't up to anything, I said, trying to get free. I just wanted to make sure everything was okay, that you weren't being lied to, that all that family savings. What family savings? He interrupted. What are you talking about? Your money, my money. Everything that goes into these Vanessa accounts, I explained. I just want to know where it's going, why we don't even have enough money to buy a new laptop for me while she's buying diamonds. Something flashed in Garrett's eyes for a moment. Doubt? Confusion. But then his face contorted with rage again. This is none of your business, he shouted. It's none of your damn business where we spend our money. He took a step forward and I instinctively stepped back. My foot had no foothold. I was standing on the very edge of the top step of the stairs. I staggered, trying to keep my balance. Garrett, still holding my hand, yanked either to hold me back or out of anger, I couldn't tell. But the effect was the opposite. I felt the ground go from under my feet. A moment of weightlessness, and then a blow, and then another blow, and another. I tumbled down the stairs, unable to stop my fall, trying desperately to protect my head. The last thing I saw before the world went dark was Garrett's face at the top of the stairs, pale, shocked, eyes wide with horror. I don't know how much time passed before I came to my senses. Seconds? Minutes? The first sensation was pain, a dull, throbbing pain in my left side and a sharp, piercing pain in my head. I tried to move and groaned at the new onset of pain. When I woke up, Vanessa had already come home. She was standing over me with Garrett, who was helping me sit up. What's going on here? She asked sharply. Mom fell down the stairs, Garrett answered, getting up. We had an argument and she. Vanessa quickly assessed the situation. Her face froze for a moment, and then she smiled, a cold, calculating smile. Oh, that's how it is, she stretched out. Well, it was bound to happen sooner or later. Your mother is becoming a problem, Garrett. She started explaining to her son that I was suffering from senile dementia, that I was losing touch with reality, that some non-existent Dr. Myers had supposedly already diagnosed me. I tried to object, but Vanessa skillfully presented all my protests as proof of my deteriorating condition. You have 2 hours to pack, Vanessa said as Garrett left the room to make a phone call to the boarding house. Then I'll call a cab to take you. Anywhere. I don't care. But you're not staying in this house anymore. There wasn't much to pack. I'd left most of my stuff behind when I moved out of my apartment. I only took clothes, a few photos, important documents. It all fit easily into one suitcase and a small bag. Garrett came in to say goodbye, looking guilty but determined. He'd believed Vanessa's lies, not even bothering to check the facts or hear my side of the story. When the cab pulled up, he helped me carry my suitcase, awkwardly hugged me goodbye, and walked quickly back into the house without looking back. "Where are we going, ma'am?" the cabbie asked. I gave Edith's address. It was the only person in Lannenberg I could turn to for help. When we arrived at her house, she was watering the flowers in the garden. When she saw the cab and me with my suitcase, she threw down the hose and hurried to the gate. "Marian? What's wrong?" I couldn't hold back my tears as I began to tell her. Edith listened in silence, but her face grew sterner and sterner. When I had finished, she took my suitcase with determination. "You will stay with me," she said in a tone that brooked no objection. "As long as it takes. I have a spare room, and it will only be a pleasure to have the company." That evening, sitting in Edith's kitchen with a cup of hot cocoa, I felt strangely empty and liberated at the same time. My life had collapsed overnight. I had lost my son, my home, the last vestiges of my illusions about our family. But at the same time, I was freed from daily humiliation, from tiptoeing in my own home, from silently enduring resentment and injustice. "What are you going to do next?" Edith asked, pouring my cocoa. I shook my head. The future seemed vague and uncertain. "I don't know. Look for a place to live, I suppose. My pension would be enough for a modest room." "You could live here," Edith repeated. "Really, Marian, the house is too big for me alone, and with your pension we can pay the bills together. It'll be easier for both of us." I looked at her gratefully, not yet fully believing that such kindness was possible. "But Garrett," I started, not knowing how to finish my sentence. "Garrett has made his choice," Edith said softly. "Now it's time for you to choose, and Marian, it's time to think about yourself. For once in your life." For the first week at Edith's house, I hardly left my room. The physical pain of the fall, bruised ribs, sprained wrist, huge bruise on my thigh, was nothing compared to the mental trauma. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Garrett's face contorted with anger, heard him scream, "This is none of your business." I felt the ground slipping away from under my feet and relived the horror of falling. Edith was an angel of patience. She brought me food to my room, didn't insist on talking, just sat beside me when I cried. And I cried a lot. I don't think I had ever shed as many tears in my entire life as I had in those few days. I mourned not only my son's betrayal, but also my blindness, my naivety, my ridiculous belief that a mother's love must be mutual. On the 8th day, I finally came down to breakfast. Edith, seeing me on the threshold of the kitchen, brightened up. "Good morning," she said, as if it were not unusual for me to spend a week in voluntary confinement. "Coffee?" I nodded and sat down at the table. Edith's cozy kitchen, drenched in morning sunshine, with geraniums on the windowsill and old-fashioned flowered curtains, seemed like a world from another reality. A peaceful, kind world where there was no betrayal or pain. "How do you feel?" Edith asked, putting a cup of coffee and a plate of toast in front of me. "Better," I answered, and it was true. The physical pain was almost gone, but the mental pain, well, it was still sharp, but not so overwhelming. "Thank you for everything. I don't know how I can—" "Don't even start," she interrupted with a smile. "You'd do the same for me. Besides, I like having company. The house had been too quiet since Fred's death." We ate breakfast in cozy silence. For the first time in a long time, I felt, no, not happy, but calm, safe, accepted as I was. "Marian," Edith set the empty cup aside. "I know you're not ready to talk about this yet, but we need to discuss your situation, the financial situation." I sighed. Of course, we had to touch on the subject sooner or later. I couldn't stay dependent on Edith forever, no matter how hospitable she was. "I know," I nodded. "I need to find a place to live, a job." No, Edith shook her head. "I already told you can live here. I mean the money Vanessa took from you, those monthly remittances. Maybe we could get them back." I grinned bitterly. How? I gave them voluntarily. There are no receipts, no contracts, just my word against hers. And the photographs of the bank statements? Edith reminded me. The ones you took before the incident. I pulled out my phone and opened the gallery. The pictures were there, blurry, indistinct, but still recognizable. Vanessa's account statements, regular receipts that matched the amounts and dates of my contributions. Maybe that's not enough, I said. Besides, I don't want to. I don't know if I'm ready for a public scandal, a lawsuit, for Garrett to find out that I'd sued his wife. Edith nodded understandingly. Of course, but maybe we should just consult first. Do you know any lawyers or bankers? I wondered. I'd met hundreds of people over the years at the supermarket. Some had become almost friends, as much as possible in the brief daily interactions at the checkout. And among them was, actually, there is one person, I said slowly. Walter Hoggins. He works at the First National Bank, branch manager. He used to come in for coffee and a sandwich at our supermarket, and we'd chat a little. That's great, Edith shining. Maybe he could tell me what to do in a situation like this? I nodded, though my doubts still gnawed at me. Should I rake up the past? Maybe it would be easier to accept the loss and move on? But Edith was persistent. That same day, she found the bank's number in the phone book and literally put the receiver in my hand. I awkwardly asked to be put through to Walter Hoggins, and to my surprise, I was immediately transferred. Walter Hoggins speaking, came a familiar deep voice. Mr. Hoggins, this is Marion Thorpe, I began uncertainly. I used to work as a cashier at the Fresh Mart supermarket on Main Street. You may not remember me. Marion, he exclaimed with genuine warmth. Of course I remember you. You always put aside a turkey sandwich for me when they ran out. How are you? I heard you retired? His friendliness gave me courage. I briefly explained my situation. Moving in with my son, monthly contributions to the family budget, suspicions of misuse of that money, and finally the conflict that led to my eviction from the house. I'm sorry to hear that, Walter said when I finished. Family financial conflicts are the most difficult. But you said you had pictures of bank statements? Yes, but they're not very good quality, I admitted. Email them to me anyway if you can. I'll see what I can do. Edith helped me send the photos from her computer. Walter promised to call back in a few days when he'd reviewed the materials and consulted with colleagues. The wait was agonizing. I kept thinking about Garrett, about whether he knew the truth about his finances, about what Vanessa was doing with his money. I even tried calling him a few times, but he wouldn't answer the phone. Vanessa picked up the phone once, and I hung up immediately, not ready to talk to her. Walter called 3 days later, as promised. Marion, I need to see you, he said without preamble. What I've discovered. It's more serious than we thought. We agreed to meet at a small cafe in the center of town. Edith insisted on going with me, for moral support, as she said. Walter Hoggins was just as I remembered him, a tall man in his 60s with a neatly trimmed gray beard and kind eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses. He kissed my hand gallantly, shook Edith's hand, and ordered coffee for us all. Now, he began, when the waitress had gone, I've been studying those statements you sent me, and I must say, the situation looks rather alarming. He pulled a folder of printouts out of his briefcase. Vanessa Thorpe has several accounts that your son doesn't seem to know about. These accounts regularly receive funds from his main account, amounts ranging from $500 to $2,000 each month. But that's not the most interesting part. Walter turned the page. Last year, a large loan was made in your son's name against the house. The amount was $120,000. I checked the money was transferred to one of Vanessa's accounts almost as soon as it was received. It took my breath away. But Garrett never mentioned any such loan. He would have told me if he'd mortgaged the house. Exactly, Walter nodded. And here's the most disturbing thing. The signature on the loan agreement. It looks suspicious. I'm no expert, but even to the naked eye, it's different from your son's signature on the other documents. Are you saying, she forged his signature? Edith gasped. Walter adjusted his glasses. I can't say that for sure, but it's a strong possibility, especially since your son is away from home a lot because of work, right? I nodded, feeling the blood drain from my face. Forging a signature on a loan agreement isn't just a family dispute anymore. It's a felony. So what now? I asked in a weak voice. You have several options, Walter replied. First, you can simply inform your son of your findings and let him handle the situation on his own. Second, you could go to the police and report a possible fraud. Third, you can file a civil suit to recover your personal funds that you gave to Vanessa. What about the loan? Edith asked. If Garrett really doesn't know about it, he could lose the house, right? Unfortunately, yes, Walter confirmed. Especially since the payments on that loan are, well, let's just say they're irregular. I'm already 3 months in arrears. If it's not paid off soon, the bank could start foreclosure proceedings. I covered my face with my hands. This was much worse than I thought. It wasn't just my hurt pride or the stolen money. It was Garrett's house, his financial future that was at stake. I need to warn him, I said firmly. No matter what he'd done to me, he needed to know. Of course, Walter agreed, but be prepared for the possibility that he might not believe it. If Vanessa can convince him that you're, well, inadequate, he might dismiss your warnings. I have to try anyway, I insisted. Edith and I thanked Walter for his help, and, armed with copies of the documents he had given us, we went home. I dialed Garrett's number right away, but it went straight to voicemail. I left a message asking him to call me back on an important matter. Then I sent a text message with the same request. I sat by the phone all evening waiting for a call, but it never came. The next day, I called again, with the same result. On the third day, I took the desperate step of going to Garrett's house in person. Are you sure that's a good idea? Edith asked me as I was getting ready. After they kicked you out, I'm not going inside, I assured her. I'll just wait outside for Garrett when he gets home from work. He needs to know the truth. Edith reluctantly agreed to drive me. We parked on the opposite side of the street, where Garrett's house was clearly visible. It was Friday night, the time he usually got back from his flights. We waited for almost 2 hours. Finally, a familiar pickup truck pulled into the driveway. Garrett got out of the car, looking tired after the long drive. I immediately jumped out of Edith's car and hurried over to him. Garrett! I called out to him as he came to the door. He turned around and his face changed when he saw me, a mixture of surprise, annoyance, and shame? Shame? For a moment, I thought he was just going to walk into the house, ignoring me, but he stopped. Mom, what are you doing here? I need to talk to you, I said, stepping closer. It's very important. It's about your house, about your money. He rolled his eyes. Don't start that again. I don't want to hear your fantasies about Vanessa supposedly being... It's not a fantasy, I interrupted, pulling a file from my bag. I have proof. See for yourself. A $120,000 loan secured by a house. You know about it? I held out the printouts to him. Garrett frowned but took the papers and started looking through them. What the hell is this nonsense? I've never taken out a loan like that. Exactly, I nodded. But it's in your name. Look at the signature. Garrett stared at the document, and I watched his face change from disbelief to confusion, then shock, then anger. It's a mistake, he muttered. Or a fake. Someone is trying to set me up. Not someone, I said softly. Vanessa. She took out that loan while you were on a cruise. The money was wired into her personal account. Garrett looked up at me, and there was so much pain in his eyes that my heart clenched. No. He shook his head. Vanessa couldn't. She wouldn't. Check for yourself, I insisted. Call the bank. Ask about the loan, about the payments, where the money went. At that moment, the door of the house opened, and Vanessa appeared on the doorstep. When she saw me, she froze, then her face contorted with rage. What is she doing here? She demanded, turning to Garrett. Vanessa, he turned to her, still holding the paperwork. Do you know anything about this loan? I saw her mask slip for a split second. Fear flashed in her eyes, but she quickly pulled herself together. What are you talking about, honey? What loan? This one. Garrett shook the papers. $120,000. It's secured against our house. Vanessa shifted her gaze from the papers to me, and I could see the pure hatred in her eyes. And you believe that crazy old woman, didn't you? She grinned. Look where those papers came from. They must be forgeries she concocted to get us into a fight. They're from the bank, Garrett objected. And this is my signature. But I've never signed anything like this. Vanessa's face froze. She was clearly considering her options, weighing what she could deny and what she had to admit. Okay, she finally said. Yes, there is a loan. I was going to tell you when you got back. It was an opportunity to invest in a very promising business. I just didn't want to bother you with the details while you were on the road. Invest? Garrett interjected. Invest in what? Vanessa hesitated, and I realized she was frantically thinking of an answer. Real estate, she said finally. A project in Riverdale, an apartment building, 20% interest. Garrett looked at her incredulously. And you decided to put a mortgage on our house without consulting me? Without asking my permission? How did you even get the loan in my name? I have a power of attorney, Vanessa answered quickly. Remember you signed the papers before the long flight last year, in case something happened to you on the road? I could see Garrett trying to remember. Maybe he did sign some kind of power of attorney without reading the text, trusting his wife. And where's the money from that investment? He asked. Why are we in arrears on the loan? The first payments will be made only in 6 months, Vanessa answered. This is a long-term project, and the debt, well, there were some unforeseen expenses. But I'll take care of it, I promise. I couldn't keep quiet any longer. Garrett, she's lying, I said firmly. The money went into her personal account. There's no investment. Check the statements. Vanessa stepped toward me, her eyes narrowed. You, she hissed. You're minding your own business again. Wasn't one fall down the stairs enough? Vanessa! Garrett exclaimed, shocked by her words. But she couldn't stop now. Your mother is obsessed with destroying our marriage, Vanessa continued, turning to Garrett. She's always hated me, always trying to turn you against me, and now she's made up this ridiculous story about stolen money. I didn't make up anything, I said calmly. All the evidence is in this folder. The account statements, the movements of funds, the loan agreement. Garrett, just check the facts yourself. Call the bank. Garrett shifted his gaze from me to Vanessa and back again, clearly not knowing who to believe. Finally, he took a step back, distancing himself from both of us. I'll take care of this myself, he said. Mom, thanks for the information. Vanessa, we need to talk. Alone. You're not going to believe her, are you? Vanessa exclaimed. After everything she's done? After everything she's made up? But Garrett wasn't listening. He turned and walked toward the house, gesturing for Vanessa to follow him. She gave me one last hateful look and followed, slamming the door loudly. I was left standing in the driveway, unsure of what to do next. On the one hand, I had done my duty. I had warned my son of the danger. On the other, what if he believed Vanessa after all? What if she convinced him again that I was just a jealous old woman with a sick imagination? Edith drove closer and called out to me from the car window. Marion, is everything all right? I sighed and headed for the car. I don't know. I told him everything. I showed him my papers. But I'm not sure he believed me. At least you tried, Edith comforted me. It's up to him now. On the way home, we discussed what to do next. Edith thought we should go to the police, regardless of Garrett's reaction. It's fraud, Marion, she insisted. Forging a signature on a loan agreement is a serious offense. If Garrett didn't take action, the bank would still demand repayment, and they'll take the house. I know, I sighed. But it's his wife. How can I go to the police to report my son's wife? How can you not? Edith objected. If you keep quiet, the consequences will only get worse. For everyone, including Garrett. I lay awake all night thinking about Edith's words. She was right, of course. If Vanessa really did forge Garrett's signature on the loan agreement, that's a crime. And not just against the bank, but against my son. She jeopardized his home, his financial well-being, maybe even his freedom, because if he knew about the loan, he could be an accessory. I called Walter Hoggins this morning and asked his advice. If your son doesn't go to the police himself, you'll have to do it, he said. The bank has already started foreclosure proceedings. They will send a formal notice in a few weeks. If the debt isn't paid by then, the house will go under the hammer. And if I file a police report, would that help Garrett keep the house? I asked. Maybe, Walter answered. If it can be proved that he didn't sign the contract, that his signature was forged without his knowledge, He could be released from the loan, but it's a long process, and the outcome is not guaranteed. After talking to Walter, I decided to give Garrett one more day. One day for him to make the right decision to go to the police himself. I tried to call him several times, but he didn't answer. In the evening, Edith put the phone in front of me with determination. "Call the police," she said. "Now, or I'll call them myself." I took a deep breath and dialed the number. "Lannenberg Police Station. How may I help you?" A woman's voice answered the phone. "Yeah, I'd like to report a possible fraud," I said, feeling my voice shake. "Forgery of a signature on a loan agreement. One moment, I'll connect you to Detective Morris." While I waited for the connection, I thought about Garrett, the little boy I raised alone, a teenager who dreamed of freedom of the road, about a man who let his wife push her mother out of his life. I didn't do it out of revenge. I didn't do it to punish Vanessa for everything she'd done to me. I did it to protect my son from more trouble, even if he'll never understand or appreciate what I did. "Detective Morris speaking." A man's voice came through the phone. "Hello?" I said, pulling myself together. "My name is Marion Thorpe, and I'd like to report a crime." After my report to the police, events moved swiftly. Detective Morris, a gaunt man in his 50s with attentive eyes, took my statement seriously. He asked for all available documents, took a detailed statement, and promised to contact the bank to verify the information. "Mrs. Thorpe," he said at the end of our meeting, "I must warn you, if your suspicions are confirmed, this will be a criminal case. Your sister-in-law could end up behind bars." I nodded, feeling a strange emptiness inside. Not joy, not contentment, just acceptance of the inevitable. "I understand," I replied. "I just want justice to be done." For the next 2 weeks, I lived in a fog. Edith was my rock. She cooked meals when I forgot to eat, answered the phone when I couldn't bring myself to pick it up, just sat by my side when I needed to be quiet. Garrett didn't call. I didn't know if Detective Morris had talked to him, if my son knew about my police report. Several times I wanted to call him, to warn him, but Edith stopped me. "Let the police do their job," she said. "If you interfere now, it might only complicate the investigation." And I waited, though each day of silence was torture. What if Garrett didn't believe the police like he didn't believe me? What if Vanessa had convinced him that this was all part of my revenge plan? What if he was suffering now, believing his own mother had betrayed him? On the 17th day, the phone rang. It was Detective Morris. "Mrs. Thorpe," he said in an official tone, "I have news on your case. The bank has confirmed that the signature on the loan agreement was forged. The expert graphologist has left no doubt. It also confirmed your suspicions about where the money went. It was indeed transferred to Vanessa Thorpe's personal accounts and then mostly cashed out." I clenched the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. "And Garrett, my son, does he know?" "Yes," the detective answered. "We talked to him yesterday. He's cooperating fully with the investigation, claims he didn't know about the loan and didn't authorize his wife to sign documents on his behalf." "So what now?" I asked, feeling my heart pounding. "We've issued an arrest warrant for Vanessa Thorpe on charges of fraud and forgery," Morris said. "But I'm afraid I have some bad news. She's disappeared. Left the house 2 days ago, taking all her personal belongings. We've put out a bolo for her, but no luck so far." I closed my eyes, trying to process the information. Vanessa had run away. Surely she wouldn't wait to be arrested. She must have felt the ground burning under her feet when Garrett started asking questions after my visit. "What about the house? The loan?" I asked. The detective sighed. "Unfortunately, even if it's proven that your son didn't sign the deed, the process of canceling a foreclosure that's already started will take time. And the bank is not inclined to wait. If the debt is not paid off in the next few days, the house will be seized." After talking to the detective, I sat still for a long time, staring out the window at Edith's fall garden. Yellow leaves swirled in the air, falling to the ground as my son's life crumbled. "Bad news?" Edith asked, entering the room with a cup of tea. I nodded and recounted to her the conversation with Morris. "Poor Garrett," Edith sighed. "No house, no money, no wife all at once." Wifeless isn't such a loss considering the circumstances, I said, surprised at my own harshness. Edith smiled weakly. You're right, of course. But it's still a heavy blow. Are you going to call him, I wondered? Should I? What could I say? I told you so. I'm sorry your life is ruined. I still love you even though you pushed me down the stairs. I don't know, I answered honestly. Maybe he didn't have time to talk to me right now. But the decision had been made for me. That evening, Edith's phone rang. She picked it up, listened for a few seconds, then silently handed it to me. Mom, Garrett's voice sounded broken, like he was crying. Mom, are you there? I took a deep breath, trying to stop the trembling in my hands. Yes, Garrett, I'm here. Mom, his voice trailed off. You were right. About everything. Vanessa, she lied to me for years. She stole everything, the money, the house, even your savings. God, Mom, I don't know what to do. The bank's foreclosing on the house tomorrow. I don't even have money for a hotel. I listened in silence, not interrupting. Part of me wanted to comfort him, to tell him that everything would be okay, that I would help. The other part, the darker, more bitter part wanted to remind him how he'd treated me when I'd needed his support. I'm sorry, Garrett, I said finally, trying to keep my voice steady. Mom, he said hurriedly, as if he was afraid I'd hang up on him. I know what I did was awful. I shouldn't have trusted Vanessa, shouldn't have let her treat you like that. And that incident on the stairs. God, I almost killed you. I don't know how you can forgive me, but, I have nowhere to go. I thought maybe I could stay with you. Just for a few days until I find a job and a place to live. Please, Mom. I closed my eyes, feeling conflicting emotions struggling inside. A mother's love, a desire to protect, to comfort, and at the same time the bitterness of betrayal, the memory of how easily he'd turned his back on me, believing Vanessa's lies. Garrett, I began gently. I don't know. Please, Mom! His voice sounded desperate. I know I don't deserve your help, but I have no one else to turn to. All my friends turned away when they found out that Vanessa, what she did. They think I was an accessory. You're the only one who can help. The only one. That word hit me like a slap in the face. Not because he loves me, not because he trusts me, but because he has no other options. I was the last item on the list, the backup plan when all the other doors closed. I need to think, I said, surprised at my own firmness. I'll call you back tomorrow. But Mom, he sounded annoyed. I don't have time to wait. I have to leave the house tomorrow morning. Where am I supposed to go? I don't know, Garrett, I said tiredly. A hotel, maybe? I told you I don't have any money. He was almost shouting now. Vanessa took everything. Aren't you listening? And there it was. The familiar irritation, the impatience, as if I were an unintelligent child who couldn't understand simple things. It was the same tone he'd used with me in the house on Maple Avenue when I asked uncomfortable questions. I'm listening, Garrett, I said calmly. And I can hear not only what you're saying, but how you're saying it. I'll call you back tomorrow. I hung up without waiting for an answer. My hands were shaking. My heart was racing, but in a strange way, I felt relieved. For the first time in my life, I had put my feelings, my needs before my son's, and the world had not fallen apart. Edith looked at me with concern. Is everything all right? I nodded. Yes. Garrett wants to move in with me. I mean, us, if that's okay with you. Edith thought for a moment, tapping her fingers on the arm of the chair. He's your son, Marion. Of course you want to help him, but are you sure that's a good idea? After everything that's happened? No, I answered honestly. I'm not sure. That's why I said I'd think about it. And what will you decide? Edith asked softly. I was silent for a long time, looking out of the window at the dark sky studded with stars. I don't know, I said at last. Part of me wants to help him. He's my son, after all, my flesh and blood. But another part of me afraid of a repeat, afraid that he'll treat me like a burden again, like a second-class citizen, that I'll be invisible in my own life again. Edith nodded understandingly. It's your decision, Marion. I'll support whatever choice you make. But remember, you deserve respect. You deserve kindness. And you don't have to sacrifice your happiness and peace for a man who didn't appreciate you when you needed him. I went to bed with a heavy heart, but woke up in the morning with unexpected clarity. I knew what I had to do. The phone rang at 9 o'clock, just as I expected. Garrett was always punctual. "Good morning, Mom." His voice sounded strained. "Have you thought about my request?" "Yes, Garrett," I answered. "I've been thinking all night. I took a deep breath. "I can't offer you a place to stay. This isn't my home, I'm a guest here myself, but I can help you with money for the first time." "Not much. I don't have much myself, but enough to get you a room for a week or two until you find a job." The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long, I thought the connection had been cut. "Garrett, can you hear me?" "Yes." His voice sounded cold. "I can hear you. So you refuse to help your own son? After everything I've done for you?" I gripped the receiver tighter. "What exactly have you done for me, Garrett? Shelter me when I had nowhere else to go and then let your wife treat me like a servant? Take my money? Push me down the stairs when I asked an uncomfortable question? I apologized for that." There was indignation in his voice. "I didn't mean for you to fall. It was an accident." "Maybe," I agreed. "But what you did afterward wasn't an accident. You chose to believe Vanessa's lies instead of listening to your mother. You let me get kicked out of the house knowing I had nowhere to go." "I thought you were sick," he defended himself. Vanessa said, "Exactly," I interrupted. Vanessa said, "And you didn't bother to check if it was true. You didn't call a single doctor. You didn't talk to the neighbors who saw me every day. You just took her word for it because it was more convenient." Silence again, then a sigh. "Okay, Mom, I get it. You're getting back at me. An eye for an eye, huh? I abandoned you in your hour of need, now you're abandoning me." His words hurt, but I didn't give in. "No, Garrett, I'm not being vindictive. I just finally realized that I deserve better. I deserve respect, care, kindness, and I found it not in my own son, but in a stranger who showed me more warmth in a few weeks than you have in years." "Is that all?" he asked bitterly. "You're just cutting me out of your life? After all the years I've been your only raison d'etre?" I closed my eyes, feeling the tears roll down my cheeks. "No, Garrett, I'm not crossing you off. I'll always be your mother, I'll always love you. But I won't be your doormat anymore. I won't be an invisible person whose feelings and needs don't matter. I'll help you with money as much as I can. But living together, no. At least not right now." "Keep your money," he hissed. "I'll manage on my own somehow. Always had." The connection went dead. He hung up. I put the phone down slowly, feeling a strange mixture of bitterness and relief. Edith came into the room with 2 cups of coffee. "How did it go?" she asked, though she could probably tell by the look on my face. "Not very well," I admitted, accepting the cup. He took my rejection as betrayal, like revenge. Edith sat down next to me on the sofa. "It's not surprising. People rarely see things from someone else's point of view, especially when they're desperate. Give him time." "Do you think he'll understand?" I asked hopefully. Edith shrugged her shoulders. "Maybe he would, maybe he won't. But the important thing is that you know you did the right thing, for yourself, and really for him too. Sometimes people need to face the consequences of their actions in order to grow." Over the next few weeks, Garrett called a few more times. First, angry, accusatory calls, then calmer, but still with a hint of resentment. I listened to him, offered him financial help, which he invariably rejected, but never wavered from my decision. Gradually, life took on a new direction. Edith formally offered to let me stay with her permanently, and I gratefully accepted. We made a simple agreement. I contributed part of my pension to the general budget, helped with the household chores and the garden. Together, it was easier for us to cope with expenses and everyday worries. Most importantly, we were good together. We were both widows, both knew the value of loneliness, and knew how to appreciate each other's company. With the help of Detective Morris and social services, I managed to recover some of the money Vanessa had embezzled. Not all of it, of course. Most of it she'd spent or hidden before fleeing, but enough to make me feel a little more financially secure. The first thing I did with the money was buy a new laptop. Not the most expensive, but quite modern, with a big screen and a good keyboard. Edith laughed at my choice. Of all the things you could have bought, you chose a computer? She wondered. Not new clothes, not jewelry, not a trip somewhere? It's a symbol, I explained. A symbol of my freedom. My right to do what I want, when I want. To read books, to watch movies, to talk to people, all the things I'd been denied at Garrett's house. Edith nodded understandingly. Then we need to celebrate properly. Movie night? I'll bake apple pie. That's how it was. Every Friday we had movie night. I'd find a movie, usually a classic we both loved. Edith would cook something delicious. We'd sit on the couch, wrapped in plaids with cups of hot cocoa, and watch old musicals, romantic comedies, sometimes detectives. Edith had a weakness for Agatha Christie. One such evening, as we watched Singin' in the Rain, I suddenly realized I was smiling. Not the fake smile I'd smiled at Garrett's house, trying to hide my pain and disappointment, but a real, genuine smile. I was happy. Not perfect, not cloudless. The shadow of the breakup with my son still lingered on my heart, but calm, cozy, with a sense of self-worth and belonging. What are you thinking about? Edith asked, noticing my expression. About how strange life is, I answered. 6 months ago, I was sure that my place was with my son, that it was the only place where I could be happy. And now, Edith nudged me gently. And now I realize that family is not necessarily blood ties. A family is people who care for each other, respect each other, appreciate each other. Like you and me. Edith smiled and squeezed my hand. Like you and me, she echoed. On the screen, Gene Kelly danced in the rain, full of joy and freedom. And we sat in the warm living room, two older women who had found in each other what we'd been missing for years, a true family. Not by blood, but by choice. By mutual care and respect. By shared movie nights on my new laptop, by shared breakfasts and walks in the garden, by quiet conversations and comfortable silence. I didn't know if Garrett would ever forgive me, if he would ever understand why I couldn't accept him into my home, but I did know that for the first time in years, I had made a choice for myself, not for others, and that choice brought me a peace and joy I hadn't experienced since I'd been widowed. The movie ended. The credits rolled. Edith reached for the remote to turn off the laptop. Another one, she suggested. Or is it too late? I looked at my watch. It was almost 11 o'clock at night. One more, I decided. Tomorrow's Saturday, so we can sleep in a little longer. Edith laughed. I like your attitude. What shall we watch? How about Roman Holiday? I suggested it. It's been a while. That's a good choice, Edith said. I love Audrey Hepburn.